1 logo design brief, and 3 chances to make the logo itself, but in 2 minutes, 10 minutes, and 1 hour. Which design, if any, will actually be good enough? But before I made a single vector path, I used ChatGPT to make this brief. The brand is called Peak Performance, and it's a fitness brand that aims to sell workout gear and supplements. Now, of course, for this challenge, there isn't going to be any planning, any research, or any of the, well, important parts of the logo design process. We're just going to jump headfirst into the actual designing, and this is how the 2-minute logo actually went. So yeah, I'm narrating this after the fact. Now, I gave this logo a few minutes of thought before laying down some typography, and I knew I needed a modern and possibly italic sans serif. And that's purely because of the energetic aspect of the brief and the young target audience that will likely be connected to this brand. And here I have Archivo Black Italic, and that's from one of my most widely used typefaces. And I felt like laying performance below in a less bold manner would actually work really well. In the end, I went for extra bold and a wide tracking of 400. Now, I did find it a bit difficult to get my crude concept out in the time allocated, and it's entirely possible that this design or something similar exists out there somewhere, and that's because it's just so generic. But I obviously haven't done any concept creation or planning or research. It's just a 2 minutes on the fly design. I just simply wanted to get anything down on the artboard. And with less than a minute left, coming into outline mode here was pretty risky. The true designer part of me wanted everything to be aligned perfectly on this design, even with only 2 minutes to work with. So after using the Pathfinder to unite the shapes, I wanted to add some intrigue to the peak. So I quickly created some asymmetry and worked in a cutout section of the mountain peak itself. Okay, like I said, probably very generic, and for sure it's not aligned and spaced out properly, but it's a 2-minute logo design. But would 10 minutes be enough to make something somewhat less generic? So for this logo, I had some more time to experiment with some things and simply just to slow down and ensure I could at least develop a concept a tiny little bit. I wanted to again go with a peak concept, but I wanted things to be a little more graphic, a bit more abstract than the first design. Right now, this stroke path looks like a random line, I know, but I did have ideas in mind for this. I wanted to use the same logo type as before because I think the choice there actually nailed it for this brief. So yeah, just playing around with the path here, still not happy with it by a long shot though. And for me, having research and a proper design process is crucial to any logo design project. And so this challenge where there was no planning involved, it was something pretty new to me. However, I've got a good foundational background knowledge on what appeals to certain target audiences in terms of shape, typeface, and color psychology, and so on. And this helped me immensely throughout this challenge. But for this concept, I quickly established that I wanted it to be an enclosed logo design. And that essentially means it's going to be placed on a shape. And in this case, that's a rectangle. I had in mind a bright, electric or bold kind of color to match the brief and the target audience. So I went for black on this almost kind of lime green. And see, that's already looking way better, but I still had a long way to go and some time left on my limit. Now this is where I started to evolve the concept by copying designs over and then making changes. And here, for example, the logo type. Even though I had more time, I was still conscious of trying not to waste too much time with alignment and things like that. I had a specific idea for the peak shape here, and to achieve that, I needed to outline the stroke. Again, copying over as to preserve the previous design changes. I'm setting up a rectangle that I intend to use to cut away the edges of the peak, and that's so the shape has straight edges that do mirror the rectangle enclosure. That should just neaten things up. Now at this point, I could tell something was a bit off with this design, and so I enlarged the rectangle to give the content in the middle more room to breathe. More about that later. I also felt there was too wide of a tracking setting on the lower logo type, and thus I also enlarged the text as well afterwards. In enlarging it, I felt like bringing down the thickness was actually a smart move here too. Copying over once more, and this is where I decided to test out a few different color schemes. The more cyan green felt a bit too cold to me, but the purple, that did intrigue me a little bit. But of course, it would never work with black for the logo mark and the logo type, and I wasn't actually completely sold on the new color scheme just yet. But I also wanted to try out a purely black version and with an outline box. With only 2 minutes remaining, I'm sure you're thinking, how much more can it possibly change? Well, here's when I had an idea that for me changed the entire design. It's actually a very small adjustment. I simply scaled down the peak a tiny bit and then rotated it around a tiny bit as well. When that was then paired up with the logo type in a more cohesive way, the design now looked more put together, more balanced. There was more room to breathe, and yet it was just more balanced. Now, the peak logo mark wasn't dominating the design as a whole. Also, the purple version of the new revised concept wasn't looking too bad either. I wanted to quickly play around with different logo type sizings here with the last few seconds that I had. So in the end, I'm not sure which version of these I actually prefer, but for a 10-minute design with no planning and no research, I'm pretty pleased with it. But hey, what about the 1 hour design? How did that one go? Now I'm not going to put you through an hour's worth of design process here, so we're quickly going to zoom through this. But for this design, I wanted to be even more abstract again with the logo mark and incorporate a negative space arrow to emphasize the movement and the progression aspect of the brand. I decided to keep the same logo type and also the same color scheme for this design, or more or less the same anyway. This was the first actual concept that I came up with in the 1 hour round of designing. I wasn't exactly happy with it, of course, but I felt like I was on the right track. On the first revision, I did like how things were looking now in the top part of the logo mark as it was extended upwards, and this completed the shape. I feel like the danger here might be that it resembles a leaf or something natural. However, the straight angular lines would actually detract away from that. Now, in this part, I'm really experimenting with layouts in unconventional ways. It's rare that you see a logo with logo type fairly small and off to an awkward asymmetrical way like this. And as I carried on developing this concept, things became more unconventional and I was walking into areas of layout that I hadn't explored yet. I do have to bring up again though that for me, designing a logo absolutely has to involve research and ideation phases. I can sometimes spend 1 to 2 weeks without actually designing a concept at all. And I know some top tier agencies can spend weeks on research and ideation alone. And yeah, I know at this point, I wasn't even halfway into my allocated time, but I felt like this concept had almost run its course. And moreover, I felt like the best design from this run had already been created. I wasn't feeling it so much actually, and so I stopped designing around the 3rd way mark into my time. And here are the 2 designs I ended up with and would consider being the fruits of the labor of this 3rd phase. I actually sort of feel like the 10-minute design might be the best out of these 3 phases. But what do you think? And lastly, I want to emphasize again the importance of the logo design process. That is the ideation and the research phases. Do not do yourself injustice and skip these parts of the design process. But if you'd like to see more insightful content when it comes to logo design or graphic design, just click the video on screen. But until next time, guys, design your future today. Peace.